the Headless Horseman appeared again late at night, charging head-on towards a large truck on his steed. When the driver saw this, he was completely stunned. Soon after, a convoy in the city was escorting the president, and a knight standing by the road appeared to be on duty but was actually waiting for an opportunity to assassinate. As the president's vehicle passed in front of him, the knight immediately raised his gun and shot a motorcycle officer, causing the convoy to swiftly go into alert mode and flee the scene with the president. The knight, relentless, raised his gun and pursued them. The rear guard officer immediately stopped his vehicle, and a shootout ensued between them. The knight's bullet struck the officer's helmet. The officer got up and raised his gun to return fire, not realizing that he had hit the knight in the head. And then the knight's head fell to the ground, just when the officer thought he had taken down the knight. As he stood up, the knight transformed into the Headless Horseman wielding a battle axe. The Headless Horseman then charged swiftly towards the officer. Suddenly, a white light emitted from a manhole cover in the middle of the road stopped the Headless Horseman in his tracks. After exchanging a few glances, the Headless Horseman could only turn his white horse around and leave. The next day, the officer told the media about his experience from the previous night, stating he had shot the knight's head off, but the knight did not fall and was still vigorous. However, no one was willing to believe what the officer said. Clearly, only Ichabod understands the Headless Horseman. Because of the assassination attempt on the president, the entire city was on high alert. Ichabod warned Diana that if the Headless Horseman's target was the president, then no one could stop him. They then went to the archives to discuss strategies on how to deal with the Headless Horseman. The biggest mystery was why the Headless Horseman was targeting the president. Ichabod suggested that the Headless Horseman might be looking for a suitable head for himself. Perhaps because the heads of royal figures, symbols of power, are more symbolic. Jake immediately responded that the more significant the person, the more magical power their head holds. Simply put, the Headless Horseman was after the president's head. Now, they just needed to figure out a way to stop him. Upon learning that the Headless Horseman had stopped in the middle of the road during his attack on the president due to an insurmountable barrier, Ichabod decided to conduct a thorough investigation. He and Diana then went to the scene of the incident, while Jenny and others went to investigate through the tunnel. Inside, they found several rune stones that had been carved there 2 centuries earlier, and they saw an unidentified object beneath the manhole cover. Ichabod decided to have Jenny bring the object back to the archive. After examination, they found that it was a rare artifact from ancient times, once used by Chinese emperors as a drinking vessel. It was likely a powerful talisman, strong enough to repel the Headless Horseman. This reminded Ichabod of Banneker, a highly skilled urban planner. During the Revolutionary War, Ichabod had seen this symbol in Banneker's work. If this area was designed by Banneker, then there must still be tricks to stop the Headless Horseman. However, all records about Banneker had been burned 150 years ago. At that moment, Jenny mentioned she had seen this symbol at an underground auction, supposedly one of Banneker's remaining works. After some research, they found it was an architectural sketch bought by a tech tycoon, Malcolm. Ichabod and Diana immediately went to Malcolm, who did not refuse them and lent them Banneker's work. But what they did not know was that Malcolm, cunning and sly, had already conducted a thorough investigation on Ichabod. Malcolm knew Ichabod was very knowledgeable about the Headless Horseman and wanted to use this to capture the Headless Horseman, which would benefit his next plan. On the other hand, after they returned to the archives with the sketch, they immediately started discussing strategies. A block marked with a J caught their attention. It was a dead-end street. Ichabod planned to trap the Headless Horseman there and then block the exit with the Banneker disc. The Headless Horseman approached a container and took out a head, which he promptly mounted onto his neck, instantly changing his attire. Mounting a motorcycle, the Headless Horseman was unsatisfied with his new head and set out to claim the head of the US president. As Headless Horseman makes his move, he sees his nemesis, Ichabod. Halfway across the country, the Headless Horseman came to a screeching halt. He intended to execute a stylish tailspin turn.
Horseman has a head.
But lacking experience on the motorcycle, he could only clumsily maneuver his way forward, after which he raised his battle axe in a threatening gesture. That's when Ichabod reacted. He instructed Diana to notify their teammates to open the gate to Zone J immediately. Ichabod stayed behind to buy time, deliberately exposing his neck and taunting the Headless Horseman, claiming he would knock off his chin. Unable to tolerate such a threat, the Headless Horseman raised his battle axe, ready to advance and strike down Ichabod. Seeing that he had successfully enraged the Headless Horseman, Ichabod turned and ran towards the gate of Zone J, with the Headless Horseman in hot pursuit. When Ichabod arrived, The gate to Zone J had been successfully opened and they quickly escaped inside. It's daytime in here. It's like the middle of nowhere. Suddenly, a shadow fell, and Ichabod felt that something else was trapped here. Then, the Headless Horseman appeared behind Ichabod, prompting Ichabod to tell Diana to turn back the way they came. At this moment, Ichabod stepped into a puddle of strange liquid. The Headless Horseman swung his axe at Ichabod, who luckily dodged in time. The Headless Horseman then grabbed Ichabod by the neck and hoisted him up. At that moment, Diana ran back and opened fire on the Headless Horseman. The Headless Horseman dropped Ichabod, preparing to deal with Diana first. Taking advantage of the Headless Horseman's turned back, Ichabod picked up a rock from the ground and quickly knocked the Headless Horseman down. Ichabod and Diana then made a swift escape. Meanwhile, their teammates outside had installed a talisman-laden metal disc in the passage. When Ichabod and Diana emerged, the gate was promptly closed. Inside, the Headless Horseman was furiously smashing against the walls, but the walls remained immovable. Just as Ichabod was celebrating their success, Malcolm and his bodyguard Job appeared in Zone J. The Headless Horseman, axe in hand, aggressively approached them. Malcolm immediately raised his hands to show he meant no harm. He knew the Headless Horseman wanted the president's head, and coincidentally, he could help the Headless Horseman get close to the president. Most importantly, he could help the Headless Horseman eliminate his nemesis, Ichabod. But only if the Headless Horseman agreed to join him. Without saying a word, the Headless Horseman agreed to Malcolm. Job then claims that he has taken the metal discs away and that the road is now clear. During a war 250 years ago, Ichabod decapitated the Death Knight and was severely injured himself, falling into a coma. Subsequently, their blood mixed together. The last thing that connected their fates was a philosopher's stone. To win the war, Washington held a secret meeting with Banneker. After years of searching, he finally located the Philosopher's Stone, but the area was soon to become a battlefield. In order to prevent the Philosopher's Stone from falling into the hands of the enemy, Washington decides to split it into 4 pieces for safekeeping, but before he can do so, he must use it first. They all knew using the Philosopher's Stone would come at the cost of human lives. Ignoring Banneker's advice, Washington, with a heavy heart, made a decision and sent his most trusted subordinate, Ichabod, to the battlefield. 250 years later, Ichabod was still unaware that this was part of Washington's plan. Now, the Philosopher's Stone had been found by the tech tycoon Malcolm. Malcolm had once signed a contract with Satan, the ruler of hell, selling his soul to him. Now, he wanted to use the Philosopher's Stone to destroy the contract in exchange for immortality. Thus, Malcolm formed an alliance with the Headless Horseman. Malcolm used Ichabod to find the final piece of the Philosopher's Stone, but it was snatched away by a servant bestowed by Satan, and he was taken away as well. When Ichabod awoke, he found himself lying on the Philosopher's Stone. Malcolm, standing beside him, asked if the stone looked familiar, but Ichabod knew nothing about it. He only knew that the stone had claimed many lives in Sleepy Hollow. Malcolm urged Ichabod to look closely at the shape. Imagining it filled and fused with blood, the ease with which Ichabod had decapitated the Death Knight and his longevity were all due to the power of the Philosopher's Stone. Malcolm claimed Washington had used and sacrificed him. Only then did Ichabod realize that his duel with the Death Knight had actually taken place on the Philosopher's Stone. Washington knew Ichabod would die because of it but arranged it anyway. Upon learning the truth, Ichabod appeared somewhat disheartened. Then, Malcolm took Ichabod to survey the surroundings. This was the very battlefield where Ichabod had died. However, Malcolm was about to achieve immortality here. He claimed he had also invited a guest. As he finished speaking, the Headless Horseman appeared on horseback before them. Malcolm then led them to the side of the Philosopher's Stone. Malcolm took out a long-cherished dagger and began to pray to God for the key to eternal life. Meanwhile, Jenny and others arrived nearby. After observing, they spotted Ichabod and each readied their weapons to rescue him. Malcolm began the ritual. Behind him, Job waved his hand, and Ichabod involuntarily stretched out his hand. Malcolm then cut a wound in the palm of Ichabod's hand with the dagger. The Headless Horseman also voluntarily extended his hand. The blood of a living body mixed with that of a body of death. Both dropped onto the Philosopher's Stone. As Malcolm recited an incantation, the blood mysteriously turned into a yellow liquid. Suddenly, Job was sucked away by a mysterious force, as Jenny, holding a magic lantern, absorbed him into it. Diana and others then entered the tent, stopping Malcolm before he could achieve immortality. They then placed several bombs on the ground, as the Headless Horseman picked up his axe. Just as he was about to attack, Ichabod quickly grabbed a gun from the ground and fired 2 bullets at the Headless Horseman. Because the Headless Horseman was standing on the Philosopher's Stone, all his powers were weakened, and the 2 specially made bullets caused significant damage to him. The group then quickly fled the tent, leaving Malcolm alone. Malcolm immediately drank the elixir of immortality from the Philosopher's Stone. After they escaped, they immediately pressed the remote control, and the tent was subsequently destroyed. The next day, Malcolm miraculously survived, and Job, who had been imprisoned in the cellar, easily escaped. They then found the severely injured Headless Horseman and began planning their next steps. Malcolm intended to summon the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. There's this monster that will make you hungry if it sneaks a peek at you. If there is food nearby, one would instantly begin to binge eat, and despite non-stop eating, ultimately die of malnutrition, essentially starve to death. Upon receiving the report, Ichabod and his team immediately began an investigation, clearly recognizing this as a supernatural event, undoubtedly orchestrated by Malcolm in the background. The group was unaware of where Malcolm had disappeared to, nor what he was plotting. Their immediate priority was to stop this demon, and so Ichabod and Diana went to the building where the incident occurred. As they were preparing to head to the restaurant upstairs, a situation unfolded elsewhere. Ichabod and Diana followed the officers to the scene, only to find a woman gnawing on a corpse on the ground. When the woman stood up, an officer on the stairs immediately shot her down. At that moment, Ichabod looked up and saw a pair of eyes emitting red light, intently watching the victim from inside an air duct. Based on its physical characteristics and its preference for dark places, Jenny deduced this was the hunger demon, responsible for causing great famines. Diana noted that within less than a day at the same location, 2 people had been killed. She concluded that the demon had only recently been released. If the creature was an accomplice of Malcolm's, then it must have left some trace. They turned their attention to the surveillance cameras. Through the footage, they discovered Malcolm's assistant, Job, carrying a mysterious device down to the basement, where the demon had accessed the building through the ventilation ducts. They then went to the basement and found a puzzle box on the floor, which was used to contain the demon. After fiddling with the box, the characters on it lit up in red, and the demon was summoned. The demon attacked Jenny, who was holding the box. Diana immediately shot at it, and the demon vanished without a trace. Back at the archives, the group began researching the demon and discovered that gold was the hunger demon's weakness. The characters printed on the puzzle box were made of gold. Jenny comes up with an idea and takes them to a junkyard, where she claims that the parts of the car contain a small amount of gold, which is enough to hold the hunger demon in place. As night fell, Jenny began twisting the puzzle box to lure the demon out. When the characters glowed, she promptly placed the box in a pre-designed trap. As expected, the demon appeared. Just as it approached the puzzle box, Diana immediately drove up and blocked the entrance. The demon was confused and tried to escape, but it was too late. The group opened fire on the demon, and Diana took the opportunity to kick it into a corner. Then, Jenny drove a forklift, trapping the demon securely. Jake and Alex then injected a liquid containing gold into the demon, and soon after, it emitted a blue glow. Having successfully eliminated the demon, Ichabod remained uneasy. He suspected that Malcolm had a specific purpose in collecting the Philosopher's Stone and releasing the demon, so they returned to the building to find more clues. And to their surprise, the scales in Lady Justice's hand disappear. Before the incident, Job had stood there staring for a full minute. Ichabod felt they should immediately return to the archives to analyze the enemy's intentions. Meanwhile, Job, carrying the scales, came before Malcolm, claiming he had absorbed enough hunger using the hunger demon. Here lay 4 coffins, and Malcolm placed the scales on the corpse that had an insatiable desire for power. It would transform into the Night of Hunger. Now, with 2 knights gathered, only 2 more were needed to complete the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Ever since the Headless Horseman was struck by the Philosopher's Stone, he has been on the brink of death, his power draining away day by day. When Malcolm found the Headless Horseman, he was already paralyzed on the ground, unable to move, his wounds still visible. Malcolm picked up a battle axe, deciding to help the Headless Horseman regain his strength. They are still missing the last knight, and they are discussing how to wake him up. Job mentioned that he was acquiring the War Rider's totem, and soon they would have what they needed. All of this was being closely watched by Ichabod and his team. Alex hacked into Malcolm's computer, observing their every move through the cameras. A symbol on the wall caught their attention. After some research, they discovered it was the emblem of an organization called Arma Mutata, dedicated to changing the world. Their tool for this transformation, the Horsemen of the Apocalypse. They had once attempted to summon them by binding human hosts, requiring powerful supernatural artifacts. This meant Malcolm had already summoned the Knights of Famine and Pestilence using the scales. The Headless Horseman already possessed one such artifact, his battle axe. The totem used to summon the war rider was called Turricula Ignis, but it had been hidden by 2 guardians during the war. Ichabod suddenly remembered Banneker, who had once escorted a mysterious box with him. When he asked about it, he was denied any information. Banneker only told Ichabod that what they were guarding could be used in an unprecedented conflict. Since then, Ichabod had not pursued the matter further, and the barn where the box was stored was eventually burned down by enemies. Only now did Ichabod realize that the box might have contained the war totem. They split into 2 teams. Jenny and others were tasked with locating Malcolm. Ichabod and Diana went to the barn, but they were a step too late. A mysterious woman had already found the box. As they were maneuvering around each other, Job suddenly appeared, clearly also after the war totem. Job throws Ichabod and Diana out the door without saying a word. Job demanded the box from the woman, but she seemed unafraid and pulled a magic crystal from her pocket. After finishing the incantation, she threw the crystal onto the ground, blasting everyone away. Diana immediately went to check on the situation. Ichabod successfully obtained the Turricula Ignis. They then returned home and detained the woman, clearly not an accomplice of Malcolm's. Yet, Diana felt a strange familiarity with the woman, as if she had seen her somewhere before.